Welcome to the Love Disciple podcast. Today's guest is Kozma. So when I met Kozma, it was during a sacred geometry course at the Modern Mystery School. And as part of the practice, we were to exchange a crystal reading. When I received my reading from Kozma, I knew that I had met the real deal. Whenever I experience like a real, true emotion, it feels almost as if I'm cracked open. Things feel really expansive. Life almost feels realer, and that is exactly what I felt when I received my reading from Kozma. It felt so true in a way that completely blew my mind, transcended everything that I knew, and I knew immediately that I had found the real deal, someone who is really, truly connected. It was a really short 60-second reading, but in that time, Kozma gave me enough information to be able to move forward with my life in a really profound way. And Kozma herself, she was not present at the time. She was actually channeling. But the experience stuck with me as one of those moments of proof that this world is bigger than what we see here in the physical. So Kozma, she holds her own temple in Austin, Texas, and that is actually where we are filming this interview. She does work and provides spiritual healing as well as physical care for the physical body and care for the mental and spiritual bodies. I am truly excited to share this with you. So without further ado, Kozma.
Dynamite, I'm blowing up my mind. I wanna be free, I wanna be cool, I wanna be bad.
All right, so welcome.
Thank you. I should really be saying welcome since this is my house.
It is your house. It's your
welcome.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. And it's your temple space that we're in right now. Would you mind telling us your name and a little bit about the space that we're in?
Well, if you know me from the mystery school, I'm Kozma. If you know me from my social life pre-mystery school, I'm Lux, and my high priestess name is Raven. So kind of depends who you ask. I won't actually learn my true name until later down the path anyway, so I'm not super attached to one identity. This is my working temple, so I live here, and it's also where I see clients.
Excellent. Do you have a name for this temple?
Well, we're in a little bit of a transition because my junior practitioner moved in June, and we're waiting to kind of see if something fits for both of us, because I don't want it to be overly me.
Heard. All right.
But I mean, I guess you could just call it the Holistic Magician Temple.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you for that. So today's podcast, I want to dive into one of the things that you mentioned when you gave your introduction, which is the mystery school. I know that is how we met, and I know that it's also really important to the way that you live your life. So we want to talk about the mystery school, but before we get into that, I have a broader question for you, which is about spirituality. Most people who are watching this podcast know what religion is. They may consider themselves spiritual, but I'm curious, what does spirituality mean in your life?
So, to me, religion, all religions, no matter what they are, is an attempt to seek the same spiritual progression that everyone on the planet has, whether they're denying it or not, but it's outsourcing the power. So there's a middleman, or it's about how do I do X, Y, Z to access God, whereas at least the mystery school version of spirituality is about knowing yourself as God. And there's still an external God being, but the more important thing for you to be focusing on is uncovering the layers of trauma and socialization and identity and ego to get to the true divine essence within. So it's kind of a constant potato peeling. Get to a little I don't know where this metaphor is going. The little potato nugget.
It's giving Russian nesting dolls.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Okay, fabulous. So one of the words that you mentioned was you said that there's a spiritual progression that everybody here's on, and you said that you're kind of outsourcing the power, or there's an intermediary to the power. What do you mean by power in that specific sense?
Well, I mean, religion is about praying to God, going to your priest to give confession, or your pastor, or whatever it is.
Right.
And that person is sort of the gatekeeper
Mm-hmm.
of the relationship. And in the mystery school, we do pray, but we don't go to someone to tell us how our relationship with God should look, or even how to develop it specifically. Like, there's a infrastructure, there's general guidance, and we have a guide whose job is to keep us on the path. But that's very general. It's like when you're bowling and you have the bumpers in the gutters, right? So my guide's job is to make sure I don't go in the gutter, but he's not going to instruct me how to bowl. He's not going to instruct me how to play the game.
Right.
You know? And I think in the beginning that's actually frustrating for a lot of people, because they're like, oh, I finally found the place that I'm supposed to be. Tell me what to do. And your guide will be like, you already know all of this. It's your job to ask the question and answer the question.
Mm.
And as you progress further on the path, you start to learn why that is. And you start to go, oh, okay. And your answer to everything is supposed to be, I don't know, maybe, could be. How do you feel about that?
Mm.
Right?
And how did you find the mystery school in the first place?
Okay, the short version of that story is I'd always been seeking, and I'd been looking under every rock since I was like 4. I came in with a very strong sense of what everybody is telling me is going on is not what's going on. And I had a lot of anger about that when I was younger.
Right.
So I called it the emperor has no closeness of it all, where everybody is telling me this is reality. And I'm like, but I intuitively know that this is all bullshit. And like, why are you trying to make me jump through hoops and go to college and focus on family and all these other things when that's all just distraction? Like, tell me, you know. And in the course of doing all that searching and getting progressively more disillusioned and angry, I did a lot of numbing and attempted deep dives with substances. So like I was drinking every single day, and that was where I was at as a direct result of my disillusionment with all of these trainings and seminars and different modalities that I had tried, and them all being a dead end. And I was just like kind of having a crisis about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, or I'm 99% sure because of that, because of the copious drinking, I got colitis, which I was hospitalized twice and I almost died. I had a near-death experience. And the doctors couldn't figure out what had happened because I didn't have any bacteria load present. They ran every test under the sun. And I didn't mention to them that I was pretty sure it was from 20 years of daily binge drinking, but I knew that was likely, right? So then when I came out of the near-death experience, I was given the choice by presence I couldn't tell you anything about now because it's faded, but they said, okay, you're on the brink of death. Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I was in so much pain. I was vomiting out of both ends every 30 seconds for weeks. I was crawling to the bathroom. I didn't make it to the bathroom a lot of the times. I couldn't drink. I couldn't eat. You know, I was really sick. So I said, I want to go, both because I'm in excruciating pain and also because I've never had a fear of death because I've always known we're eternal. And I'm like, if it's time to go to the next level, like, great. Like, having a body is a real bummer a lot of the time for me, and the planet is really challenging for me. And because I have super senses, it's like just existing is painful. So that was an easy answer. I was like, let's go. And then I didn't die, so I was really confused. Because I was like, well, why even ask me if it wasn't an actual choice? But what had happened was the me that was there when I was asked the question left. And I don't know if it went to another timeline or, I don't know how any of that works, but I had no sense of identity. I had no connection to my memories. I had no connection to my name. That's when I became Kozma, because I was told in like kind of a fugue state that was my new name. And I just went with it because I didn't feel any connection to the old one. So I was just like, sure. And it was showing me visions of a different version of me that had the tattoos that I have on my face now. So I went and got the tattoos. I was basically just like, okay, this is who I am now. And it was really weird, like talking to my mother and really close friends and stuff, and just being like, I have no fucking idea who you are. Like, I know who you're supposed to be to me, but I don't feel any sort of connection to you whatsoever. And I didn't feel any sort of connection to myself. And then obviously that was a very strange experience. And so I really started to recommit to trying to find the answer. And it's not that I hadn't been doing the work previously, but everything that I had looked at was so clearly not it so quickly. And I was like, okay, I'm doing enough messing around. Like, got to find the thing. So I just was spending all day, every day, researching like local Austin spiritual resources. And I was like, something is gonna be it. And I'll know as soon as I find it. Something I can't explain is the way I found the mystery school is I was scrolling through my phone looking for some picture, and there was a event picture on my phone that was at the school, and it said sound healing. The school doesn't do sound healings. Can't find that picture on my phone since then, right? But as soon as I saw it, I was like, how did I not immediately look this up? Like, everything about this name is intriguing to me. So that whole thing was weird. But then I looked it up on Google, and as soon as the website started loading, before I saw any of the pictures, any of the verbiage, anything, my whole body got what I call bliss tingles, where I was just like cellularly on fire. And I couldn't even focus on reading because I was so like, I was having like a spirit orgasm. I was just like, this is the thing. And I'd never felt that sure about anything before. So I didn't really look through the pages or anything. I just clicked on services. I was like, what's the first step? And the first step is the life activation. So I scheduled that the following morning with Ian. And after that, I talked to Erin, who's my guide, for like a long time, like 45 minutes. And I was so manic and like on edge. I just was like, here's my story, I've always been looking and it's so frustrating, and you have to tell me if this isn't the thing, because I cannot take another dead end. I was like, I will make it your problem. Like, you have to tell me. And he was like, well, and this is why he's my guide, is because he has the perfect energy for me. He was like, I mean, believe me or don't believe me, it doesn't matter to me. It is the thing, but I mean, whatever. And I was like, okay. I feel like if it was BS, that he would have tried to sell me harder than that, right? So that's what kind of tipped me over. And then I was in initiation by that weekend. Right. And then since then, I've done all of the sacred geometries that have been offered. I've done all the classes that have been offered locally. I went to Healers Academy. I went to Ritual Master 1, and I'm on my way to Ritual Master 2 in a little bit less than a month. So I've done everything literally as fast as it's possible to do it. Because it's like, wandering through the desert for 40 years and somebody hands you a glass of water. You're just like, yes, so thirsty. And after this, it will slow down a bit because the change has been so drastic. I mean, to go through all of that learning and initiations and everything, I need to sit and integrate, and I need to kind of let myself feel everything that's happened, because I've been going so fast that everybody else has stories about like how dramatic they felt, how much their life changed after their life activation. I'm like, I don't have that story because I was in initiation by that weekend. Or like how they felt after the couple of years after Healers Academy or whatever, I'm like, I don't know how I felt because I was already in Ritual Master, So I do need to not pause, right? Because I continue to do the work, but like I really want to do Kabbalah when it comes pretty soon, and a lot more healings and things before I continue to progress, because that's something that's really important when you're on the path, is you can't get too much power before you have the ability to cleanly hold it, because every time you have an initiation, you're expanding your capacity to flow light. But what happens if that container is dirty, right? Yeah, I'm flowing 100 times more light, but me and the client, if I'm providing healing, isn't getting 100 times more light because there's all this dirt that I haven't cleaned up. So that's really my focus going forward, is making sure that hugely expanded container is pristine as possible before I expand it even further. And everybody is supposed to focus on that, keeping that balance, correct? And finding the middle pillar, which is why you have the healer's path and the warrior's path, and you have to do them both. Well, you don't have to do the ritual path, but if you do that, if you do the warrior path, you are required to do certain steps on the healer's path so that you stay centered.
Stay balanced, right? One thing that I thought of when you were talking, it's already slipped my mind, but it was just in general about the mystery school being a place of progression, not just for you, but for everybody. Like, if somebody else wanted to learn about the mystery school or try to find out about the mystery school, like, where would they even find out about something like that? Because we're in the modern mystery school, but there have been mystery schools before. There's an ancient mystery school. The mystery school talks about how there were 7 total. And I guess I'm curious, for somebody who's like perhaps my friend, and I'm curious about telling them about what the mystery school has done or what they could maybe experience. How do you talk about that if it's so unique to you?
Usually the way that it comes up is leading by example, where people are like, you have changed so much. And that's actually never been abnormal for me. I've always changed a lot really quickly, but it's different now. The flavor of it is different now, because the changes aren't, oh, now I aesthetically look way different than I did 6 months ago, or oh, now I'm into this new hobby that I wasn't into last time you checked in on me or whatever, which is what it was before. Now it's like, you are more you, and you're changing, but you're more consistent than you've ever been. And why is that? I want what you have. And also just how much healthier I've become in my emotional stability and cutting out all damaging substances to my body, and my daily commitment to my spiritual practice and how it's integrated into every single second of my life now, versus like, oh, I'm going to set aside an hour to meditate, or I'm going to read this book about mysticism, or I'm going to get really into this esoteric rabbit hole or whatever. Now it's like, this is my second by second existence. It's intertwined in my entire being. And I don't really usually bring it up, because I think when people are ready, they're gonna ask. Sometimes I plant seeds, because that's part of your job, but usually people just ask me, well, what is this, and how can I get some of that? And then I say, I can talk to you about my personal experience, but I'm not an expert. I'm this level on the path, and there are people who have been doing it a lot longer, and I think a lot of times it's actually more responsible to refer them to somebody like my guide, who's been doing it for 13 years, and is really high up in the progression. Also because the energy that's communicating with them is communicating them in a way that's very specific in what they need to hear, because it's not the individual really making the decision about what's said, because he's so connected to I don't know what we're supposed to refer to it as, but he's so connected to the hierarchy that he's kind of a vessel at that point.
Right.
You know, whereas I still have my individual identity that is filtering through the words that I choose and all that. So I usually say, you know, look up your nearest center and talk to the director or talk to one of the guides. And sometimes the main person isn't the right person for that individual. And then you can just kind of talk to a couple of guides and see which one jives with you and go from there. And just also but understand that the person who feels the best to talk to might not be the right person for you. You know, like I need a guide who's very uncomfortable, who's going to be really direct and not going to put up with any BS and isn't going to let me lead. He's just going to be like, just get it done, just do it. You know, if there's a little wiggle room where I can, because I'm used to being the dominant energy in most spaces, and it's not that I want that, it's just what I'm used to. And if somebody else isn't driving, then I'm going to start driving because somebody has to drive.
Right.
You know, and so my guide needs to be so solidly in the driver's seat, and he doesn't let me cross over even a little bit from the passenger seat. Whereas other people might need a little more gentle of a lead, or, you know, you might need a woman instead of a man, or whatever it is. So just find the closest place, and if there isn't a center near you, then I'm sure they'd be happy to Zoom or Skype or find an initiate that's in the area that could sit down and chat with them.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take just a quick 2-minute break before we get back.
Hello, welcome to the Love Disciple podcast. I wanted to take 5 minutes to talk about this podcast series and what you can expect. So first things first, the title, Love Disciple. To be a disciple is to be a student of something. And the word disciple has a lot of meanings throughout history. You know, Jesus had his disciples, and we actually use a version of the word discipline a lot in modern day life. So to have discipline is to truly be a student of something. So let's talk about love and being a love disciple. Being a student of love. When you're a student of something, you make a commitment to study that thing. And when you make a commitment to study something, you walk a path where you don't necessarily know the destination. And that's the whole point of this podcast. Spirituality is, in my opinion, the final frontier. We live in a world where you can Google absolutely anything. You can find the answers to almost any question that you wish within 30 seconds or less. We even have ChatGPT that will have a conversation with you and help you dive deep into your psyche and how you're feeling. But there are some things that are just truly unknown, things that science really doesn't have an answer to. And that's what this podcast is about. It's about the experiences that are within. And this is where, in our society, where we have all the answers, where we really, really, really are looking for love, support, and growth. The things that are most valuable in life, in my opinion, are the things that you can't necessarily Google an answer to. And I've found that whenever I study qualities like love, grace, kindness, you can't Google what happens if you're loving. There's no answer. The answer has to be found by living and experiencing it. So above all, these interviews are about people's lived experiences. People's experience with different spiritual practices, people's experience with everyday activities like eating or running a business or working a job. And then people's experiences with things that may be a little bit outside of your everyday. Things like the paranormal, life and death, and even things like astrology or tarot. So I hand-selected these interviews and these interviewees because of what they bring to the table in terms of their experience. Each of these people are on the final frontier of what it means to be a human. They're paving the way forward for all of us. So if you're someone who's been curious about what it means to be spiritual, or even somebody who doesn't know anything about spirituality. I hope to show you a kaleidoscope of people so that you can understand that all paths forward are valid. There's no such thing as enlightenment where you're all done and you're a perfected being, that it's a journey of continual development, and most of all, that you have the power to choose your own lifestyle, your own path, and your own way of being. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely, lovely rest of your day.
Okay, great. So we're back. I really have been dying to hear about your sacred sexuality practice and what it is that means to you. Could you tell me more?
Yes. So I refer to it as sacred sexuality for a couple of reasons. One, to differentiate it from Tantra, because it is definitely not that. And two, because when you use the word sexuality, it's easy for people to be interested, because when there's a problem in their life, it's very hard to figure out how to address it, except if it's showing up in their sex life. Then it's really easy to identify, and it's really easy for men in particular to try to find a solution. Because it's like, well, this is not acceptable. Whereas if you have a general sense of ennui or listlessness, or you're not being spiritually fulfilled, or you don't feel like you're living your purpose, you're a lot less likely to try to solve that problem, right? Because it's really easy to just kind of put it on the back burner and numb it out in whatever way you're doing that, or focus on the right in front of you human existence concerns. But actually, what is a more accurate description is sensual alchemy, because it doesn't really, it has to do with sex, but it's not about sex, right? It's about the creation energy that we tap into with our Hara chakra, and we're using that creation energy for our expression of sexuality, but we're also using it for making art and enjoying food and appreciating beauty and all these other things. And when you find a way to purify, direct, and harness that energy, it doesn't just fix your sex life. It also starts a love affair with existence. Like when I make, I do decadent health, I call it. And I make, one of my favorite things to make is either fudge or brownies. And when people taste it for the first time, they always message me and say something like, I don't know what you did to these brownies. Are there drugs in these brownies? Like, or other people will say, I feel like your essence is infused in these. And I'm like, yes, because I made them with creation energy. And so you're having an almost sexual experience of this chocolate because it's the same base that comes from the same place. And so when people come to me, sometimes they're needing something that is overtly sexual in nature, like impotence or lack of ability to climax as a woman or whatever. But oftentimes it's really more that they're needing to feel the touch of unconditional love, because it reminds them of their divine worthiness. And the fact that they don't have that is affecting, like their whole life is rotting at different degrees. And it's like that meme, they're like the dog in the room that's on fire, and they're like, it's fine. And then eventually they go, wait a minute, it isn't fine. And the sexuality is an easy entry point for a lot of people. But usually new clients are surprised how little it has to do with sexuality. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my specialty is what I call remothering, which is I hold people like they're babies, and I just have my hand on their heart chakra, and then I flow it. I start at the heart and I flow it all the way up to the heart, and then I kind of let it distribute the energy body and the aura, and then I do that again, and sometimes that's all that people can handle for a year. Sometimes I have people that have been coming for 3 years that we haven't gotten past step 1 because they're needing that. And it always makes me cry. It always makes me emotional when somebody says, I haven't felt this relaxed since childhood, or nobody's ever touched me like that. That's the one that always makes me cry, because I'm like, oh, the tragedy of never in your life feeling unconditional love. Like, it's the blaring symptom of disconnection from source that we're all walking around so screaming in pain about. Yeah. And when people feel that for the first time, it's like their whole face changes, their whole energy changes. They're so grateful. They're so deeply connected to their emotions in a way that they're not accustomed to, especially men. And women, usually the trauma that they're bearing is the overgiving and the depletion of their creation energy. So they come in crawling, just like, I'm giving to my significant other, I'm giving to my children, I'm giving to my career, which puts them in their masculine, so they're out of balance there. I'm giving, and nobody is filling my cup. And they get very emotional about somebody touching them for the sole purpose of giving, because they have never been touched without an agenda. And that's really beautiful to see too. And it's hard. It's really hard for them. There's a lot of resistance at first. They're tensing, or their head is telling them that they don't deserve this, through the lens of whatever their harshest inner critic is. Like, it might not come in the head as, I don't deserve this, but it's, I'm uncomfortable. Sometimes it's, I'm cold. Sometimes it's, I have to go to the bathroom. They just have to get away from the touch. It's like staring into the sun. And then when you help them work through it, then you feel their utter relaxation of receiving, and you see their feminine bloom, because the spiritual feminine energy is receptive, and they've lived an entire human life without receiving, which is mind-blowing to me. Right. And especially if they've had children, they've depleted that creation energy so much without it being, the battery being recharged. And that's why women, the stereotype about women not being interested in sex after having kids, it's like, well, yeah, there's no gas in the tank. The car cannot drive. Like, you can get in the car and you can will it, right? Which is what a lot of partners do. Because I'm used to getting in the car and the car drives. But it literally can't. So especially if a woman has a lot of dependence, whether they're her children or not, she's depleted and depleted. And you have to find a way, either yourself or the people in your life are going to have to fill that up at some point, because your body will start breaking down. And men deplete their creation energy by overly focusing on production, which is the proper masculine side of things, creating things out in the world. But they get so hyperfixated on that, it usually relative to their career, and they're not ever receiving, they don't spend any time in their feminine. And so it just kind of burns out, and no amount of success can give them the feeling of fulfillment that they've been chasing since they first started having it, and they don't understand how to change their focus, so they just keep going. And then they start losing their hair, and then they have impotence issues, and then they're overly addicted to pornography or whatever. And pornography in particular is the most insidious thing that's ever happened to men in my opinion. Everybody complains about what it relative to women, right? Like, yes, it's objectifying the goddess and not worshiping the goddess, but the reason men watch it is because instinctually at their core, they know their job is to worship the goddess. And because they haven't been given a way to do it by society or their family, and because everybody demonizes sex, it's the third rail of everything, including spirituality. They're like, well, this is what I have. This is the outlet I have. They don't know that that's what they're trying to do, but that's what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. But instead, because of the energy behind it, because whatever created it is not of the light, in my opinion, it's sucking the life energy out of them like a leech, you know? And you can see it. Like, I've had clients that I've been in touch with now for 10 years, and you can see when they don't do the work, when they don't fix the problem, when they go back to the addiction, they age so fast. And it's like they deflate, they get smaller. There's less like firmness to their skin. Their hair gets thinner, and it's not the things that we think of as aging us are, I mean, everything is based in the spirit body, right? And it's reflected in the physical body. So you can go, oh, they don't have a good diet, or they don't sleep well, or whatever. Yeah, okay. But mainly the reason that they look like they've been sucked out hollow with a straw is because they're overusing their creation energy every day for 30 years or whatever, and eventually that catches up to you. You can get away with it when you're 23 or whatever, right? But then later on, when you have less creation energy, because as you age, you naturally are flowing less, unless you're very deliberately doing things to reverse that process. Men and women, it just naturally diminishes, because eventually you're transitioning to the next stage of existence, and that's a totally different bag of chips.
Can you talk about that with regards to women? Because I've been so fascinated. We have so many examples of the maiden in media all over the spectrum. A few of the crone, but they're very limited. Like, what has the transition been like so far, and what can you tell me about that?
Let's see if I can remember how you normally phrase this. The fixation with the maiden is the byproduct of the inability to connect with the mother. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of them are purposeful, because men being in that Peter Pan stunted state makes a lot of people a lot of money. And it makes them easily controllable. And also the puritanical resistance to sexuality, just generally, especially in this country. I mean, there's a lot of things that create that reality. But the reason that they are obsessed with young women, and it is horrifying. Like, my junior practitioner is 27, and I see the way that men react to her, and it reminds me of the way that men reacted to me when I was that age, and it's so gross. And it's like, she's beautiful, but she could be not beautiful, and it would be the same flavor of energy because she's 27. It's like this very specific energy that's really gross and very, like, it's not even predatory. It's like being cold and wanting to be by fire, because it's the place of goddesshood that's the most approachable, and they want to be near the hearth of the goddess. Now, if you come at the mother, she's going to require that you come correct.
Yes.
And most men have never been taught how to do that, so they're terrified. Like, I am utterly terrifying to the vast majority of men, whether they're highly successful or alpha or, whatever man, because I am solidly in my mother, and I'm not going to put up with peeing on the floor, And the crone, you don't just have to come correct. You have to be highly in touch with your divine masculine for her to even let you anywhere near her. Whether she registers that or not. An older woman, whether they register the divine masculine feminine thing or not, whether that's on their radar as a concept, they just naturally embody that no fucks to give, like,
yeah,
I'm not putting up with your nonsense. And so men focused on the path of least resistance relative to access.
got it. That's so amazing. I've never heard it explained that way. Do you work with people who are transitioning from the mother to the crone in your temple space?
I have had an uphill battle my entire career with getting women to feel worthy of being in this space. I would say the highest ratio I ever had was 20%
Really?
female. Because of that, the giving turns into martyr syndrome. And then they're overly identified with the suffering as the root of their self-worth. So I'm sacrificing all day, every day for my family. I give everything to my children. I give everything to my husband. If you take away that constant merit of pain, they have to look at, well, what am I without that? And that's really scary.
Right.
So usually I would say the woman that finds me is mid-30s, and she hasn't settled into the martyr syndrome yet. She's trying to resist that. She's going, okay, I've been living the same way for X amount of years, and enough is enough. So there's like this little window with women. But I am working on trying to find a way to connect with the other phases.
Got it. Well, I wanted to ask about that. If people wanted to come visit the temple or learn more about your services, how could they do that?
You can go to Holistic Magician, MAGICKIAN.com. And we, I've been in business for 10 years, so we have a very robust client list, and there's months and months and months where we're not accepting new clients. And then when we are, I'll post something on my Instagram or send out an email list or whatever. And if you are really feeling called to connect, I would say to just shoot me a message on the website to kind of get on my radar. And sometimes if somebody is in a dire situation, I will always make the time if somebody really is motivated or really needs it, or I feel like we have a contract and, it's not really a choice. Like, the people that I signed up to work with are the people that I'm going to work with, and I'm just waiting for them to find me.
Got it. Well, I appreciate you sharing what you've shared with us so far. One question that I ask every single person who comes on the podcast is there a specific text or book that you found really useful that you could recommend to people?
I'm smiling because the answer to that is not going to be helpful to anyone, because it's a very difficult to read tome that isn't going to make any sense to you if you haven't done Ritual Master 1. It's gibberish until you do that. That's been the most helpful for me. Other than that other people could actually get something out of, I would say, oddly, the first thing that came to mind is the multi-orgasmic man.
The multi-orgasmic man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because I feel like it's the most helpful to the widest range of people.
Okay.
It's not just specifically about that, but it'll introduce people to the concept of climax coming from a deeper, more spiritual place. And the most important thing to learn in what I do is to master your base primal drive and stop letting it run your life and make you a crack addict of endorphins and, dopamine, and use it for its proper purpose, which is to fuel the rest of the system. And I think that book is a very entry level kind of starting point that's super well known, so people might have already read it, but just to kind of begin the process of thinking about it as a holistic system. Like, there's sensuality exchange happening between us right now, having a conversation, and the red of the couch and the purple of the wall and the weight of the air in the room and the colors of the lights and all of that, right? Is we're having a sensual experience. If you know what you're doing, you're just kind of in a constant state of bliss. If you don't know what you're doing, then you're just sitting on a couch staring at a person and, none of this is doing anything for you because you're not interconnected cellularly. It just seems really boring to me.
Fair. Very fair. All right, well, thank you so much for talking with me. I had a lot of fun and I learned some new things. I hope that you all enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Bye.